Brown v. Board of Education, the right to racial equality in education.
This case was filed by Oliver Brown in order to protect the rights of his daughter, Linda Brown. Linda Brown applied to be at an all-white school as it was the closest school to her home. She was rejected because of her race and sent to a segregated black school further away. Her family, along with 12 others, filed a class action lawsuit against the Topeka Board of Education, alleging its segregation policy was unconstitutional.
The U.S. Direct Court for the District of Kansas heard the case but ruled against it, relying on the prior case of Plessy and its separate but equal doctrine. The Browns didn't take this and decided to take it to the Supreme Court, where they issued a unanimous 9-0 decision in favor of the Browns. This case connects to the theme because the Browns filed a class action lawsuit to protect their right to racial equality in education.
On May 17, 1954, in a unanimous decision, the U.S. Supreme Court declared state laws establishing separate public schools for students of different races to be unconstitutional. The decision deconstructed the legal framework for racial segregation in public schools and Jim Crow laws, which limited the rights of African Americans and other people of color.
This case began in 1951 when the public school system in Topeka, Kansas, refused to enroll a local black student named Linda Brown.
This is a case that took away the right to racial equality in education from the Browns and other families involved.
Linda Brown lived just a few blocks away from Summer Elementary School.
She applied to be a student there as it was the closest school to her home.
Summer Elementary School rejected her due to segregation laws at the time.
She was sent to Monroe Elementary as it was the close segregated school to her home.
Getting to school was not easy for Linda. She had to leave home by 7:40 each morning to walk to a bus stop that was 6 blocks away.
Linda had to walk through train tracks, cross a busy street, and then board a bus that would take her the rest of the way.
It often took Linda a while to get to school.
Linda thought Monroe had nice teachers and a nice facility, but the problem was how far away it was from her home.
Oliver Brown took matters into his own hands to protect the rights for his daughter.
He decided to try and take this case to district court.
But the Browns were not the only ones experiencing this.
Over the course of 3 years that this was happening, other families were also experiencing similar situations to the Brown family.
In 1951, the Browns and others decided to take this case to the U.S. Direct Court of Kansas with hope that they would gain their rights back.
They filed a class action lawsuit against the Topeka Board of Education, proclaiming the state's education policy is unconstitutional.
The special 3-judge court for the U.S. District Court for the District of Kansas ruled against the case.
The court relied on the precedent law of Plessy and its separate but equal doctrine.
So the Browns unfortunately didn't win this case.
But the Browns and others didn't want to give up just yet.
The Browns and the NAACP Chief Counsel Thurgood Marshall referred this case directly to the Supreme Court.
On May 17, 1954, the Browns awoke with a goal in mind: to win this case.
Thurgood Marshall argued the Browns' case before the court.
He made sure to hire the best attorneys, some of them being Robert Carter, Jack Greenberg, Constant Baker Motley, and Spotswood Robin.
The Browns' argument was clear. They argued the 14th Amendment that guarantees equal protection for citizens of the U.S. to the Constitution ensures equal protection of the law, and racial segregation violates that rule.
The Topeka Board of Education used Plessy's law to defend themselves during the case.
The Supreme Court agreed with the Browns' ruling in a unanimous 9-0 decision. They decided that racial segregation is unconstitutional.
On this day, Earl Warren decided that separate but equal doctrine doesn't have a place and that separate school systems for black students and white students were unequal.
The Browns were thrilled that they won the Supreme Court case.
Although the Browns won, the Supreme Court did not specify exactly how schools should be united.
The Browns' victory did not change the country and its segregation laws overnight, and there was still work to be done, but it did leave a huge impact on the U.S.
Linda Brown never went back to Summer Elementary School because of her age at the time the case was over.
The result of this case helped other African American students, and it helped the civil rights movement that was also happening at the time. Brown v. Board of Education 2.
In May 1995, the Supreme Court issued a second opinion, known as Brown v. Board of Education 2. This ruling would recommend that future segregation cases should be settled in district courts.
The Supreme Court recommended that district courts would decide in favor of desegregation.
They were also encouraged to desegregate schools with a deliberate speed.
This concerned many people in the U.S. and caused many families to become stressed.
Brown v. Board of Education 3.
In 1978, Richard Jones, Joseph Johnson, Charles Scott Jr., and Linda Brown Smith were concerned that the Topeka Public Schools open enrollment policy would lead to further segregation within the district.
They thought that now that there was open enrollment within schools, white parents would switch their students to a select school with intentions for segregation.
The district court reopened the Browns' case after 25 years of it being proclaimed as finished.
A 1994 plan was approved and a bond issue passed, which resulted in Topeka schools meeting standards of racial balance by 1998.
The point of this case was to create racial balance between all public schools in Topeka, Kansas. They eventually achieved this goal on July 27, 1999. One of the new magnet schools created is named after the Scouts for their impact on civil rights and in the Browns case.
It took many years for segregation to fully end in schools, but with the help of civil rights movement, segregation came to an end.
The Brown versus Board of Education was a tough time and wasn't easy for the Browns, but it had a huge impact on America. The Browns fought for their right and didn't give up, even when they lost the first time.
Not only did this case benefit the Brown family, but it also helped the civil rights movement. Though it took a while for the case to come to an end, it led to many other outcomes that were perceived as a step for racial equality in education.
Fun facts. More than 1/3 of U.S. states segregated their schools by law.
The Brown versus Board of Education started off as more than 5 cases.
The plaintiffs took a great personal risk to be a part of the case.
Thurgood Marshall became a Supreme Court judge in 1967 after the Brown versus Board of Education case was done.